Okay, so here we are in part 3. That would be my cat getting up quickly off of a stack of paper. Sorry. Okay, so let's talk about European Christendom and its emergence. Here we go. European historians previously labeled the period discussed here as the Dark Ages. In their opinion, cultural, political, and economic decline followed the fall of the Roman Empire. Most recently, however, historians have marshaled evidence of a more significant advance in every avenue of human endeavor. Their findings have resulted in a new name for this period of European history, Late Antiquity, a label that stresses both political and cultural continuities between Rome and its successor states and new dynamic institutions. Few revisions go unchallenged, however. Environmental historians have brought back the label Dark Ages, arguing that the time period was indeed a dark one and a result of a colder and drier climate. Agricultural production declined, famines occurred year after year, and infectious disease spread across Afroeurasia. This harsher climate between 400 and 900 CE caused dying and morbidity on a large scale. There is much evidence for this assertion other than that assembled by climatologists. To begin with, a plague swept across Afro-Eurasia and decimated the Byzantine Empire during the reign of Justinian. More on that later in the semester. Even more important is evidence of that drought in the Arabian Peninsula that led Arab tribal peoples carrying the banner of Islam to pour out of their severely affected lands in search of better lands and a better life, as other nomadic groups had done. In these bleak times, Christianity provided a crucial source of unity in much the same fashion that Abbasid Islam and Tang China offered to those who sheltered under their imperial umbrellas. In the 5th century CE, the mighty Roman military machine gave way to a multitude of warrior leaders, whose principal allegiances were local affiliations. Although the political ideal of the Roman Empire cast a vast shadow over Western Europeans, the inheritor of the mantle of Rome was a spiritual institution, the Roman Catholic Church, whose powerful head, the Pope, was based in Rome, and whose universalizing agents, missionaries and monks, carried its message far and wide. In Eastern Europe and Byzantium, a form of Christianity known as Greek Orthodoxy prevailed. Thus, the realm of Christendom, made up of Western Roman Catholicism and Greek Orthodoxy, dominated all of Europe and left parts of the Iberian Peninsula and parts of Asia untouched, but still served to unify the lives of millions. Far removed from the old centers of high culture, Charlemagne, who ruled roughly from 768 to 814, was king of the Franks. Whoop, that's the wrong Frank. There he is. King of the Franks in northern Europe, expanded his western European kingdom through constant warfare and plunder. In 802 CE, Harun al-Rashid, the ruler of Baghdad, sent the gift of elephants to Charlemagne. The elephant caused a sensation among the Franks, who saw the gift as an acknowledgement of Charlemagne's power. In fact, Harun often sent rare beasts to distant rulers as a gracious reminder of his own formidable power. In his eyes, Charlemagne's empire was a minor principality. This was the empire that Charlemagne ruled for over 40 years, often traveling 2,000 miles a year on campaigns of plunder and conquest. He ultimately controlled much of Western Europe, which was a significant accomplishment. Yet compared with the Islamic world's rulers, he was a political lightweight. His empire had a population of less than 15 million. He rarely commanded armies larger than 5,000, and he had a rudimentary tax system. At a time when the palace quarters of the Caliph at Baghdad covered nearly 250 acres, Charlemagne's palace at Aachen was merely 330 by 655 feet, so much smaller. Charlemagne and his men were representatives of the warrior class that dominated post-Roman Western Europe. For a time, Roman rule had imposed an alien way of life in this rough world. After that empire faded, however, work became once again the duty and joy of the aristocrat. And although the Franks vigorously engaged in trade, trade was based on war. In fact, Europe's principal export at this time was Europeans, and the massive sale of prisoners of war financed the Frankish Empire. From Venice, which grew rich from its role as middlemen, captives were sent as slaves across the sea to Alexandria, Tunis, and southern Spain. The main victims of this trade were Slavic-speaking peoples, tribal hunters, and cultivators from Eastern Europe. It is this trade that gave us our modern term slave from Slav for persons bought and sold as items of merchandise. Yet this seemingly uncivilized and inhospitable zone offered fertile ground for Christianity to sink down roots. Although its worldwide expansion did not occur for centuries, its spiritual conquest of European peoples established institutions and fired enthusiasms that would later drive believers to carry its message to faraway lands. Charlemagne's empire was unquestionably primitive when compared with the Islamic Empire or the Tang Empire in China. What made it significant was its location. Far removed from the old centers of high culture, it was a political system of the borderlands. It featured an expansionist Christianity that drew energy from its rough frontier mentality. Indeed, Christianity now entered a world profoundly different from the Mediterranean cities in which it had taken form. Christians of the West felt that theirs was the only true universal religion. Their goal was to bring rival groups into a single Catholic Church that was replacing a political unity lost in Western Europe when the Roman Empire fell. And the Catholic Church was not just for Romans, it was for all times and for all peoples, quote, in a wide world which has always been inhabited by many differing peoples that have so many different customs and languages, so many different forms of organization and so many languages, and who have had so many different religions. Only one organization could bring them all together to paradise, and that was the Catholic Church. Several developments gave rise to this attitude. First, the arrival of Christianity in Northern Europe had provoked a cultural revolution. Pre-literate societies now encountered a sacred text, the Bible, in a language that seemed utterly strange. Latin had become a sacred language, and the books themselves were vehicles of the holy. Readers who knew Latin as a spoken language could understand the script, but Irishmen, Saxons, and Franks could not, for they had never spoken Latin. However, Latin scriptures in the newly Christian North were cleaned up, words were separated, sentences correctly punctuated, and uppercase letters added to provide clarity to the text. Second, those who produced the Bibles were starkly different from ordinary men and women. They were monks and nuns. Monasticism, the word monastic and monk come from the Greek monos or alone, refers to a man or woman who chooses to live alone, without the support of marriage or family. Monasticism placed small groups of men and women in the middle of societies in which they had nothing in common. It appealed to a deep sense that the very men and women who had little in common with normal people were best suited to mediate between believers and God. In Muslim, as in Jewish societies, religious leaders emphasized what they had in common with those around them. Many Islamic scholars, theologians, and mystics were married men, just like the public, even merchants and courtiers. In the Christian West, the opposite was true. Warrior societies honored small groups of men and women, monks and nuns, who were utterly unlike themselves. They were unmarried, unfit for warfare, and intensely literate in an incomprehensible tongue. Northern Christianity also gained new ties to an old center, the city of Rome. The Christian bishop of Rome had always enjoyed much prestige, but being only one bishop among many, he often took second place to his peers in Alexandria, Antioch, and Constantinople. Though people spoke of him with respect as pope, many others shared that title. By 800 CE, this picture had changed. As believers looked down from the distant north, they saw only one pope left in Western Europe, Rome's pope. The papacy as we know it today arose due to the rise of the Catholic Church of Western Europe, with the pope representing the desire of new Christians in northern borderlands to find a religious leader for their hopes. Charlemagne recognized this desire very well. In 800 CE, he went out of his way to celebrate Christmas Day by visiting the shrine of St. Peter at Rome. There, Pope Leo III acclaimed him as the new emperor of the West. The ceremony ratified the aspirations of an age. A modern Rome, inhabited by popes, famous for shrines of the martyrs, and protected by a modern Christian monarch from the north, was what Charlemagne's subjects wanted. So, in part 4, our final part of the video, we're going to talk about Tang China. And I hope that this was interesting to you as we talked about Christendom in Europe. So part 4 and the final part of the video is going to be Tang China.